Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video, and probably the last video of 2024. My name is Canton Little, and today I'm going to be talking about my year of reading. Stick around. So 2024 was a pretty ambitious year for my reading. This year I set a goal on Goodreads to read about 100 books, and while I surpassed that goal by reading 200. And while I don't have enough time to go through every single book that I read this year, whether it was philosophy, manga, fiction, or anything in between, I just want to talk about the top 10 books that I read this year with 2 honorable mentions. And so we're just going to kind of just talk about it a little bit. But first, I'd like to say thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you so much for supporting me and just engaging and being part of this awesome community. I'm very much looking forward to launching the Faulkner project, and thinking about maybe starting a book club around that, but I'll let you guys kind of talk about that in the comments below if you'd be interested. If not, I'm just going to post some videos about it as we go through the upcoming year, upcoming 18 months for Faulkner. So yeah, thank you guys so much for that. Anyway, this year I read 200 books, and it was quite amazing because I never thought I'd read 200 books in a year. Now, of course, some people might say, well, manga, can you really consider manga a book? Well, I read it in a different language, read it in Japanese. So I would say that that counts as far as reading, because you're reading in a different language and using a different part of your mind. So, but feel free to disqualify me if you like. I don't really mind, I don't really care. So anyway, I'm going to talk about my top 10 books of the year. But first, I'd like to start with 2 honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1, The Inferno by Dante. This is part 1 of the Divine Comedy, and I absolutely love this book. But I wouldn't say it was in my top 10, and I think part of the reason that is because I haven't read the entirety of the Divine Comedy. But I think number 2 is just the fact that it was impressive, but there were other books that I think really did a better job at conveying certain ideas. And don't get me wrong, I like the Mark Musa translation. I plan on reading the rest of this quite soon, probably in October. And I really liked it. I really did. I like the themes, I like the preoccupations and the ideas, but I wouldn't necessarily put it in my top 10. I would say it's probably my top 15, but definitely not in my top 10. It was a great read, very engaging. I'm quite surprised. I like Dante a lot. And Virgil played a different role than what I was anticipating. Definitely more engaging, and I like how he navigates purgatory and such. I think that's a very interesting, navigating through hell, and then I'm sure purgatory is the next one, so I'll probably get more into that, but yeah. So Dante is part of the honorable mentions, and on for honorable mention number 2. My second honorable mention is Light in August by William Faulkner. Now, Light in August was my first Faulkner, and I love the story quite a bit. Reverend Hightower and all the other characters are quite interesting. The themes and ideas that Faulkner deals with are, in a sense, more intense than the ones in The Sound and the Fury. But it was my first Faulkner. I didn't really understand it, and so that's why it's going to go in my honorable mentions, because I like it. It made me more interested in Faulkner, and it's the reason why I decided to start the Faulkner project. But at the same time, that first read around with any bit of Faulkner, he's an enigmatic writer. You have to spend a lot of time with him, and so I just think that maybe a second read will end up making me love the book. I'm not sure, but it definitely is in my other honorable mention. Now let's get to the top 10. So coming in at number 10 would be John Quincy Adams' A Man for the Whole People by Randall Woods. Now, Dr. Woods is professor at my alma mater, the University of Arkansas, and whenever I found out that that he was book release on John Quincy Adams, I was instantly hooked, because my mom and I have decided to do a presidential biographies reading challenge, and we were about to get to John Quincy around that time, so we decided to go ahead and do that. And as you can see, I have mine signed here, which is really cool. But John Quincy Adams, my goodness, this guy was incredible. I mean, an incredible statesman. He has such an incredible career, incredible family history. I mean, when your father is one of the founding fathers, when you are the first American in Russia and arguably the most well-traveled American of his generation, reading the stories and the love and the life of John Quincy Adams was just interesting. I definitely would like to read his wife's memoirs, but John Quincy Adams was a great read. There were parts of this book that could seem a little drivelly at times, but John Quincy is such an amazing president, statesman, professor, just an interesting individual. I would say that he's kind of like a Renaissance man. Moving on to number 9. Number 9 is the life-changing manga of tidying up, Marie Kondo. Now, I did a video on this manga earlier this year, and it quite literally did change my life. When I say that, I mean like literally. It made me rethink how I purchase things, how I conduct myself, and how I conduct my room and my possessions. Nowadays, when I go and buy books or clothes, I think about intention, and I also think about, how much am I going to enjoy this? Am I only going to read this once and then sell it, or am I going to endlessly reread this? Or when it comes to clothes, it's like, I kind of want something that's not like too super expensive that it's irrational to purchase it, but I also want something that's practical and I could get decent quality from. So this book, I've rambled on about it a lot. I mean, there's a whole YouTube video that I'll leave in a little icon button right there. This book was incredible, and I highly recommend it, especially if you are someone like me who wants to focus on taking more control of the intentionality that they have, as well as just figuring out how to live more with less. And so that's why this is at number 9. At number 8, we have John Milton's Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is number 8. What am I thinking? I know, it's crazy. I love Paradise Lost. This was an incredible book, an incredible epic. I mean, like, I had, my jaw was on the floor. And I think part of the reason I put it at number 8 is because I had to read it for my master's class on British literature. And so when you're having to forcibly read something and read it quickly, you're not able to appreciate it as much as you can. And so that's why I have it at number 8. I definitely plan on rereading this. It was incredible. There's a lot of ideas that I would like to explore with Paradise Lost, and more so with Milton, because John Milton was an incredible writer and an incredible thinker of his time. That's why this is at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I love The Count of Monte Cristo. Je t'aime, je t'adore. Le Comte de Monte Cristo. And the reason why I love this book so much is because of the cliffhangers, the story, the plot, and I am ashamed to say that it took me nearly a year and a half to get through this book, because I was reading it last year and I got like halfway through and decided to stop. In case you're wondering, I just put my bookmarks in random spots when I finish books. It's just whatever. But I loved this book. Dantes is an incredible character, and I need to watch the new French film that released of this, the adaptation of this. But yes, I highly encourage you to read this book. You will not regret it. If you haven't read Dumas before and you'd like something that's maybe not as intense as Le Comte de Monte Cristo, I recommend The Trois Mousquetaires or The Three Musketeers. That is a phenomenal book, and I plan on reading it next year with the Hardcore Literature Book Club. But yes, number 7, love this book. It was phenomenal. Coming in at number 6 is The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. Now, Thomas Mann is a writer that I have not read before I read this. And I read this for a literary criticism class and wrote a paper on this book. Magic Mountain is an intense read. It is literally like climbing a mountain to understand and appreciate the themes and the symbolism, the ideas that Thomas Mann puts through this particular work. And for me, I had to kind of speed read it a bit because I had to write a paper on it for class. It was like a 16-page paper. I really feel like I went through this a little too quickly, and I like to reread it within the near future. But this is an incredible book. Hans Castorp and his friends, there's a lot of symbolism and allusions to other facets of literature and philosophy, and a lot of symbolism between what the sanatorium means, the mountain, who each character represents in terms of an idea or an ideology. And so I highly recommend this book. You will not regret it at all. Coming in at number 5 is another classic, Don Quixote de la Mancha. Now, Don Quixote was an incredibly funny book. I have not read Don Quixote before, and I was recommended the Edith Grossman translation. I plan on reading some other translations, just kind of seeing, kind of dipping into it, kind of like what I'm doing with Dostoevsky. I know that this has been held as a bit of the holy grail of Don Quixote or Cervantes. And so if you guys have any other translation recommendations, like the Rutherford translation or anything like that, be sure to leave a comment below. I loved Don Quixote, but I think Sancho Panza just wins me over. There's a lot of themes and preoccupations within this novel that are timeless. And I think this is a novel I'll probably end up rereading every single year, because there's something deeply resonant about Don Quixote and the ideals that he represents, and the person who he wants to become. And so I think that this is just a phenomenal book, and you should definitely read it. Coming in at number 4 is The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. The Sound and the Fury was a phenomenal read. It was a hard read, and it's a book I'm going to be rereading quite soon. But it certainly blew anything from Light and August out of the water for me, because the narrative techniques, the stylistic restrictions, and the ideas conveyed within this book are simply just experimental and just incredible. I could sing the praises of this book a lot. I think you should read this, and definitely read it when we're in April. Definitely read this. You will not regret it. The Sound and the Fury is a classic, an American classic, and I highly, highly recommend that you read it. Coming in at number 3 is a book that I will do a video on. It's a book that I've struggled with for 2 years, and I finally finished it. Ulysses by James Joyce. How is this at number 3? I have no idea. I never thought I'd actually like this book. I hated this book. Every single time that I attempted it, I would throw it across the room. I hated it. But somehow won me over. I don't know how. I don't know how he won me over. It's the first part is okay, you're getting through it. And then you meet Leopold Bloom. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is cool. But the funeral scene, I didn't know you could do that with language. His experimentation with language is just simply incredible. I didn't think you could do it. James Joyce is what happens when you make a linguist a writer. That's what happens. And it makes me want to celebrate Bloomsday and everything. He makes me want to go to Dublin and actually do the tours and grapple with the idea. The fact that Leopold Bloom isn't this mythical hero like Odysseus. He's just an ordinary guy. What James Joyce conveys in this book is something quite beyond myself, and I'm just amazed that I even like this book as much as I did. I put it at number 3. There will be a separate video on this book, I promise. Don't get me wrong, James Joyce is a difficult writer. This book is hard. I read this in 10 days. I don't know what's wrong with me. But I highly recommend it. Take your time with it, and be prepared to struggle with the book, because you will struggle. I struggled for 2 years, but I got through it. Coming in at number 2, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Now, this book was an eye-opener. I went to a writing conference back in October, and I met a gentleman who's a psychotherapist, and he was telling me about this book, and so I was like, okay, I'll pick it up. I read this book, and there's a lot about this book that terrifies me. I mean, utterly terrifies me. The statistics on mental health and how it's become an epidemic amongst young people, people my age, people younger, it's just something that's scary. Because to me, kids should be kids. You should have a childhood. I grew up, when I was born, the iPhone wasn't a thing. The iPhone didn't come out until I was about 4 or 5 years old. I remember the first iPad came out. There's a lot of things I remember, but there's a lot of things in here where it's like, man, we live in a highly technologically saturated society, and we should really focus on how to mitigate the side effects of technology, the negative side effects, because there's a lot of good things that can come from having the internet, having social media, etc. You connect with people, you get to have unrestricted access to certain information. Now, of course, with that unrestricted access comes certain dangers. Of course, you have things like adult content and darker things on the internet. But on the other hand, you also have access to information that would otherwise could be restricted by certain entities, governments, etc. In which that has happened. Big tech can control the flow of information if they want to, etc. But regardless of any of that stuff, this book is an eye-opener, and I think any parent, anybody should read this book, because you will be surprised at the statistics. You'll be surprised at how rapidly the childhoods of many kids these days are different. They're a complete 180 from any of the childhoods that people who were born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and early aughts experienced. Like, even when I compare my own childhood to this book, I'm like, man, you know, how many kids these days just grow up on a tablet? This book is a warning, and we should be listening to it. This is an incredibly well-researched book, well-written book, and it's the reason why it's my number 2 read of this year. And finally, for number 1, because I didn't have a physical copy of it, we have Washington by Ron Chernow. Boy, was this book incredible. And when I mean incredible, I mean that to the strictest interpretation of the word. Ron Chernow is single-handedly one of the best biographers I have ever read. Okay, the way that this man writes, his prose, his style, his ability to convey a story is simply phenomenal. And I think this was probably my mom's favorite book that we've read of the presidential biography. It was a huge, great start. It's like, man, you know, how can you start talking about George Washington? You know, most Americans, and I assume most people who are outside the American education system, know that George Washington, first president, commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, you know, he had slaves, etc. But there's a lot more to Washington in this book, and it's like, whoa, you know, you get to see sides of Washington that you never really thought of. He humanizes Washington. He makes some, and that's the thing that I think every historical biographer and historian should strive for, is to remove the mythology from certain people in the past and make them human. The humanization of Washington was something just incredible. The stories, his life, the things he had to overcome, just simply inspiring, really. Was he a perfect man? No, nobody is. Was he a saint? No, by no means. But did he do everything he could to maintain his honor, to defend his family, to defend his country, to defend his friends? Yes, he did. And this is why I think that this is a book you should read. It is my number 1 book of this year. It is a thick book. Like the physical book's like this big. You can listen to the audiobook, you can read it on the Kindle, you can do whatever. I highly recommend that you read it. It is phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. Please read it. Anyway, so this was my top 10 books of this year. If you liked it, great. If you didn't like it, well, you know, better luck next year, I guess. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and share. And I will see you guys next year. So stay tuned for the Ulysses video, and I will see you guys very, very soon.